Hey, it's Ryan with some commentary on the upcoming MLF Bass Tournament on Mille Lacs this week. For those of you that don't know, there's a large televised bass tournament coming here. It's a little different format than we're used to seeing. Generally, the tournaments that come here are five biggest fish, bring them in to weigh in. This tournament's a little different. It's a cumulative weight tournament, so you catch as many fish as you can and they record them and release them right on the spot. So they can catch a lot of fish, they can run up the numbers, they can run up the weights, and somebody can really run away with the tournament if they get on a good school of fish. And because of that, I think this tournament's really interesting and it's going to be cool to see what happens. There's guys coming from all over the country. They specialize in their own little niches in their parts of the world. And so I think it kind of leaves the door open for us to see some different techniques put to use out here and maybe see something different than what we normally see in smallmouth fishing. And kind of the segue from that, the reason I think things may be different here is because we're going to be going through a big change here shortly. Right now, they're calling for highs in the upper 80s today on Mille Lacs. It's the Thursday before the tournament. Winds are from the south, blowing like 40 miles an hour. It's just howling out here today. And what I've noticed is all the fishermen are just tucked on the southern shoreline. They're all over the place, but nobody's more than about a half a mile from shore. And what's going to happen here come tonight and tomorrow is we're going to get a change in weather. It's going to go from sunny, hot summer weather to actually a storm's supposed to move in tonight. The temperatures are going to drop substantially. We're going to go from highs in the upper 80s to highs in the low 70s, maybe the upper 60s. And it looks like we might get a fairly cold rain. And to most people in fishing, that's kind of a devastating thing and kind of a normal thing before a tournament to get a nasty cold front. But out here, that's different. And that's kind of a timing thing with these smallmouth. We're in early September. It's been a pretty warm summer. We've had a lot of beautiful weather, and a lot of these fish are kind of starting to stage close to their fall grounds, but they really aren't in a fall pattern yet. And what kicks that off is the first big cool down of September. And that is kind of on its way right now. It's not the drastic drop in temperature that I would like to see to kick off the fall fishing, but it's going to be big enough where I think it might actually do it. And just looking at the weather and looking at the calendar and seeing the dates that these guys have picked to come up here, I think they may have hit the nail on the head as far as their timing for being on Mille Lacs right now. So this big cool down that we're getting, what it should do is kick off some really hot fishing. I think everything's going to work out perfectly. I think these guys are really going to be in for a treat as far as good fast action and also some big fish too. But since this isn't a 5-fish tournament, it's not a big fish tournament, it's just a cumulative weight tournament, the techniques and tactics might be a little different than what we're used to seeing. I still think the Ned rigs, the bottom dragging baits such as tubes and Ned rigs, or the Mille Lacs classic, the drop shot, I think those are going to be dominant out here. I think most guys are going to be doing that. But since we have so many people coming from different parts of the country, they're bringing their own unique skill sets here. So you got guys that are really good at crankbait fishing. You got guys that are really good at moving bait fishing. And there's a variety of different fishermen that have a variety of different skill sets. And with this front coming in and this big temperature swing and these bass spurn off into their fall feeding frenzy and these guys hitting the timing just right, we may see that the typical techniques that generally get the job done to win a tournament out here might not be the most effective means of catching fish, especially, since it's not a big fish tournament, it's a cumulative weight. So I'm curious to see if some of these guys that are using some of these other techniques that may be more efficient than simply looking at electronics and putting a bait right next to a rock or right next to a fish, some of these techniques such as moving bait techniques could be far more efficient for catching a lot of fish and a lot of quality fish and really running up the weights on the board. So I'm really excited to see what they bring to the table. I want to see some new techniques used out here, and I think it could be a slugfest of a variety of different techniques out here. So to kind of get to the main point of this, there's a few techniques that I think could really run up the numbers out here given the right conditions. And I think what I'll start with is the first one, which isn't really a surprising technique. It's done well out here before. It can definitely win tournaments out here. And that's just the small swim baits, little paddle tail swim baits. I don't know if it's won tournaments out here in the past, but guys have done really well doing it. But given the right conditions and being on the front end of this cool down, I think if a guy gets on the right school, he could clean up house with one, catch a lot of fish, put a lot of weight in the boat really quick, and they can do it under a variety of conditions. So it could be a dominant technique in the tournament from beginning to end. So the little swim bait, that's my number one pick as far as something maybe unconventional, maybe a little bit of a wild card out here for winning. My second pick is a little more unconventional than the swim bait. I guess you can't really call the swim bait unconventional, but this one is for Mille Lacs. And it's not something a lot of guys do out here, but it works really well. I've had really good success with it, but I still don't do it very often. And that's the small crankbait. And it doesn't have to be a small crankbait. It could be any crankbait. Whoa, the wind's whipping out here. Could be any crankbait of any style, so whether it be a square bill or a deep diver, just any sort of crankbait. I think if a guy, some of these guys are really skilled with crankbaits, they could bring their knowledge and skill set up here and really put on a clinic with a crankbait, whether they get on a drop off, a ledge, something like that. But if they find the right school of fish, you can catch a lot of fish quick on a crankbait. I think that's a really good choice out here. I don't know if many people will be doing it, but I think a guy could really do well on it given the circumstances right now. The next technique, the third one that I'm going to go over, is one of my personal favorites out here. It's not unconventional on this lake by any means, but the timing is a little bit unconventional. And what I mean by that is the jerkbait is more of a colder water technique in most people's eyes, especially a pre-spawn technique. And I think that given the cold front that's coming, and given the way these fish get fired up and how they can go on feeding frenzies, I think a skilled angler with a jerkbait could really catch a lot of fish in a hurry and really run up the weights. So, and that's a technique that can work from the beginning of the tournament all the way to the end. Now, moving on to the last technique, it's a well-known smallmouth technique. It's a well-known largemouth technique also, but it's something that you don't hear a ton about in fishing tournaments. And it's something that I've been using a lot more in recent years on Mille Lacs and having a lot of really good luck with, but it's really conditions dependent, and I just don't think it's going to be a tournament winning technique out here, simply because I don't think a guy can carry it for 5 days and catch fish on it for 5 days out here with any sort of consistency. And that bait is the Spybait. Now, that being said, when the Spybait is going, there's nothing better than it. And I think a guy can really run up the weights in a hurry fishing the Spybait. But it takes just the right set of conditions typically for that to happen. And it'll be interesting because over 5-6 days, however long this tournament goes, there should be the right set of conditions. We'll just see if somebody figures it out. But my last wild card, I don't think it's going to be a tournament winning technique. I really don't see it going bell to bell out here. But it's something that could be a big player, especially if it gets calm, a calm sunny day, is the Spybait, and it'll be real interesting to see if anybody puts a big bag together on it for at least a day. And last but not least, we'll do an honorable mention. A technique that I don't think is going to be a big player out here, but you never know, is Topwater. We've had some extremely good days on Topwater on Mille Lacs Lake. It's a lot of fun. Topwater is everybody's favorite way to catch bass. but I just don't see the conditions setting up very right for it for very long. And I just don't know if that's going to be much of a player. But it'll be interesting to see if anybody throws it. It can definitely put a big bag together for a guy if everything lines up right. And it'll definitely be a ton of fun to watch to see if somebody does it. But I don't think that'll get used much out here, but it'd be really exciting if it did. I hope you're as excited to see this play out as I am. I'm pretty curious to see what techniques work. Like I said, once again, we have a different format. It's not the 5 biggest fish. It's just a cumulative weight of lots of fish. And instead of seeing the typical dragging style baits or drop shot where a guy's trying to get 5 big bites throughout the day, it really pays for somebody to fish more efficiently than simply using those baits and using their electronics. If a guy can get a large school of fish fired up with the right moving bait or the right reaction bait, I think they could do a lot better than some of those more slower, more finesse techniques. And I think the timing is right. I think the weather conditions are right. And I'm excited with anticipation to see how this plays out. If you're coming up fishing this weekend, good luck as always.